Hello everyone, and welcome back to another of our weekly sessions in English here with the American Friends of the Prado Museum. Today we're going to be having a closer look at this beautiful painting of the Dead Christ supported by angels by Antonello da Messina. Antonello da Messina is called da Messina because of his place of birth, and he is one of the most important painters of the Renaissance from southern Italy. And we don't know very much about his life. He might have trained in Naples, but he's very well known for his early use of oil painting. This painting here is dated around 1476, and he's well known in the Prado and in this collection for having created perhaps one of the most emotive paintings in the collection. And this painting has an interesting history because it was really almost entirely unknown to the world of art history until its admission into the Prado in the 60s, in the 1960s. Now, it was first documented in a collection in the 17th century in Galicia, in the northwestern part of Spain. And it was probably in a convent there in a city called Monforte de Lemos. And when Napoleon invaded Spain, a lot of artworks were being taken, and so the nuns in that convent tried to hide a lot of the paintings by putting them in different private households, and it seems like they gave this painting to a family called Yanez, and it stayed with them until later in the 19th century, and eventually they sold it to another family who also kept it for generations until it was purchased by the Prado Museum in 1965. And it's just rare for such an important, such a beautiful painting to take so long to surface. Now, in this painting, what are we looking at? Well, we see the body of Christ who's already died. He's almost naked. He's wearing nothing but a loincloth, or what is the cloth of purity, and he's draped in this blue sheet. And in his hand, we can see the wound from the nail. And we don't see the wound on the opposite hand, because his arm is bent in this awkward position with the weight of his forearm pressing down to bend his wrist in this unnatural position, really in the way that only a lifeless arm would permit. And his arm is actually being drawn back to reveal the gash in his side from which blood continues to stream. And if we look at his head is rolling back and his mouth falls open, giving us this powerful impression of a lifeless body that is limp and inanimate, and blood still drips down from his forehead from where he wore the crown of thorns. And behind him we have this angel, this young angel, who struggles to hold the weight of this lifeless, full-grown man, and his face is one just of complete and total heartbreak, and his brow is furrowed, his eyes are full of tears and red from crying, and he has these little perfect tear drops that are rolling down his cheeks that are red from having been crying. It seems like the grief of losing someone is too much for this small child, just like this full-grown adult is physically too large for him to manage, and this makes for this very potent, emotionally charged painting. Now, David Friedberg of Columbia University has dedicated numerous studies to the relationship between neuroscience and humanities, with this painting as a prime case study. And he notices how gesture and how empathy work, and how our brain actually recreates some of the physical sensations that we see to be able like this, to be able to feel some of the suffering, which is really what empathy is, this idea of sharing in suffering, of compassion. When you look at the image of Christ's head rolling back, you can almost feel the weight of your own head rolling back. This is a feeling that we know what that feels like, and we can relate to it. And Antonello is making this beautifully potent and emotional image, pulling on this way that our brain works and how we read images. Another perfect case of empathy, which is why this is here in this gallery, is here in the Descent of the Cross. This other instance of showing empathy that you're probably already familiar with, in the way that Jesus's body being taken down from the cross, that is lifeless, which is in this position here, is echoed in Mary's position as well, in this beautiful painting by Roger van der Weyden. In the way that Jesus has physically died, it seems that Mary is emotionally died, and the way that their actions and their gestures echo one another show this sharing and suffering, this idea of empathy and compassion. There's a wonderful conference by David Friedberg that is in English as well on the Prado's website. So if you're interested in this idea of this combination of art and humanities and neuroscience, then I definitely recommend that you check that out. But this painting is also here in this gallery full of Flemish painting for because we talked about Antonello's early use of oil painting, right? And there's a lot of this combination of both Italian but also Flemish in this painting. Vasari actually said that Antonello trained with Jan van Eyck, who was the alleged inventor of oil painting, and that Antonello was supposed to be the one who had brought the use of oil painting to Italy. Now, neither one of those things are in fact true, but it's an important feature of his production, of his work, that contributes to this exactness, the sharpness, the texture, the quality of the objects that we see. The inclusion of a landscape as well also pulls on this tradition of Flemish painting, with this use of aerial perspective that gives us a sense of air, gives us a sense of distance, of depth. This is actually a view of Antonello's native Messina. We can see the city walls and also the Duomo of Messina and the coastline. Now, the origin of the iconography of this painting can be found in what are called imago pietatis. And imago pietatis are these images of piety, and they were paintings that didn't necessarily have a clear narrative, but they were about producing a feeling in the viewer, making the viewers be inspired with feelings of devotion as he or she contemplated and meditated on the image. And so these often included these kind of close-up images of Christ that was suffering during or right after his torture and execution, also called the Passion. And so this composition with this naturalistic representation of Christ, who's revealing his suffering to us, and the grief of the angel that's accompanying him, with the body of Christ taking up so much space in the composition, really right in the foreground, taking up the majority of the painting, is a reference to this tradition of these imago pietatis. There's also Venetian influences for this painting, with painters like Giovanni Bellini and others, but Antonello's composition is really highly original. One, in the extreme emotional impact of the image that he's created, and also in the inclusion of just one angel, because other times this kind of image has been made, but with two angels balanced out, holding up the body. And here Antonello has just used one angel, which might even heighten this emotional impact, this intimacy. So it's a beautiful painting. It's a fascinating opportunity to talk about how we read images, how we respond to them, what they do to us, and how those processes take place. And also think about why a painting is where it is in a museum, why we have this Italian painting here in this Flemish room, for its relationship with the works that are around it. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you again next week for more sessions in English.